Welcome to this Steps Travel webinar, where we're going to be previewing our cruise in the Galapagos Islands in June and July 2025. Joining me on the call today are Roxy Dukes, one of our specialist travel consultants here at Steps, someone who absolutely adores the Galapagos. And when we consider that with the Galapagos Islands, with all that amazing flora and fauna, that 50% of it at least is endemic to those islands, what we're going to need to lead this cruise is a specialist guide. And I am delighted that we're able to be joined for this session from Costa Rica by Jonathan Green, who will be leading this Galapagos Islands cruise for us this year. Now, you can go to the website to get a full biography of Jonathan, but I'd like to give you some highlights. Not only has he been working, living, and breathing the Galapagos Islands in situ for over 30 years and is a recognized world specialist. You will have seen him on Blue Planet with the BBC. I would like to give you some real-time reviews of Jonathan from Steps Travel customers, clients, travelers, and travel consultants from recent years. So to praise this, Jonathan Green is a guide who charms and wows in equal measure. So get ready to enjoy him in a second. But from this year's tour, from people who travelled in recent months, I will quote from a Mr. Chris Everard, who was happy for his review to be used in this session. Jonathan Green is an absolute rock star of a guy, a geologist, a naturalist, founder of the Whale Shark Foundation, and a natural teacher and guide. Simply awesome. So before we discuss the trip in detail, I know that, Jonathan, you've got a small presentation on the Galapagos Islands for us to enjoy. Can I hand over to you now to begin? I hope that I didn't embarrass you.
Thanks. No, Charles, no pressure at all. That's but thank you very much. Well, welcome to everybody. Thank you indeed. And I imagine for those of you who are joining us, it's either because you've already booked a space and you're excited about what's going to happen, or you're thinking about going to the Galapagos fairly soon and haven't quite made your mind up, or you've been to Galapagos and maybe even thinking of going back, because that trip in a lifetime suddenly turns into something you might want to do again. But what I would like to do before we perhaps have a few questions about the trip specifically is just give a very quick introduction to the Galapagos Islands. So if you'll bear with me, and if we can get this technology to work. So just a very brief introduction. Most of you know exactly where the Galapagos Islands are, but they do have a very unique position. As Giles just mentioned, they're unique in many ways. They lie approximately 600 miles or 1,000 kilometers offshore. So they're mid-ocean islands. Bearing that in mind, these islands are very, very isolated indeed. And there are about 17 named islands, 43 named islands and rocks. The interesting part, or one of the interesting parts, is that they're totally volcanic in their formation. Not only are they volcanic, but they're also extremely young. So if we talk in geological terms, the Earth being some 4.6, 4.7 billion years old, the oldest of the Galapagos Islands is somewhere between 4 and 5 million years old, which means that, again, in geological terms, these appeared literally a blink of an eye ago. So they're very, very recent, and that recent geology is plain to be seen. Everywhere you go, you've got these incredible geological landscapes. And that was one of the things which fascinated, of course, Charles Darwin when he visited. Also, equally unique, and this is perhaps the most important part that we're going to talk lots about when we're actually in the Galapagos, are the ocean currents that affect the Galapagos. This is a crossroads of currents unlike any. So if you look at the position, of course, the Galapagos straddle the equator. If you go all the way around the circumference of the Earth following the equator, there is no other location or island system which has the combination of ocean currents that Galapagos does. So just very briefly, from the north, you can see there's the Panama flow, also known as the El Nino, which is a bit of a misnomer, but that is summed up warm water, which is flowing down from the Gulf of Panama in Central America. So for 6 months of the year, Galapagos is bathed in very, very warm water and has an extremely tropical setting. However, for 6 months of the year, the predominant currents from the south, which you can see are the Peruvian ocean current, the Peruvian coastal currents, together making up the Humboldt Current, bathe the Galapagos Islands in very, very cold waters. Because of the trade winds blowing through the area, there's a lot of upwelling, and where you get an upwelling in the combination of warm and cold, you get an explosion of life at a very, very basic level. So unicellular life, a lot of plankton, and therefore a lot of nutrients. And where you have nutrients in the water, you have huge amounts of life. So that is one of the most unique parts of Galapagos. And that water is flooding into Galapagos, probably coming up from Antarctica. Again, we'll talk more about that when we're actually out in the Galapagos themselves. Now, I like this image because you've got Charles Darwin, of course, who perhaps put the Galapagos Islands on the map. 1835, he made his voyage to the Galapagos. He didn't look like that picture there because he was a young man. He was only 23 years old when he headed out for 5 years. And I do like the interesting assortment of animals. You've got some iguanas that definitely fit. You've got an ice volcano, that goes well. Tortoises, excellent. But the macaws and parrots, I'm afraid, we won't be seeing because Galapagos has its own unique flora and fauna. Perhaps the most iconic, giant tortoises. Everybody talks about Charles Darwin, the theory of evolution, and pretty much everybody knows about the giant tortoises that at one time would have been roaming around a lot more of the Earth, but have only survived in some small island areas. Now, Galapagos, again, is this very, very unique combination of tropical. So you get lots of species underwater from the Indo-Pacific. We get pink flamingos flying by, for example. But by the same token, those cold Antarctic waters provide a habitat which is suitable for animals such as penguins. So you do get this absolutely unique diversity of flora and fauna. Nowhere else on the planet can you see marine iguanas. And one of the names that they were given, and I think this is perhaps the best name, was Imps of Darkness. And that was William Beebe in 1924 when he visited the Galapagos Islands. So you can't find these marine lizards anywhere else. As Giles just mentioned, a huge percentage of everything that you see is actually unique or endemic to the Galapagos. So at least 40% of all the flora and fauna is going to be endemic. So it's a combination of volcanic landscapes and this incredible wildlife. Land iguanas that look like small dragons, these beautiful, beautiful landscapes. And all of these places and the photographs that I'm showing you right now are things that we'll be seeing and places that we'll be traveling through. So the itinerary, again, we'll cover this in a little more detail in just a moment, is also fairly unique because it combines not only the central part of the archipelago, but also the western side of Isabella and Fernandina, which for me is perhaps the more wild area of the Galapagos, as well as the south. So again, it's an absolute unique journey. It's one where you're immersed in the wildlife. None of these photographs have been taken from a hide. These are simply wandering around on trips like the one that we're going to do. You get incredible opportunities to observe the wildlife and just sit there and enjoy the surroundings. Blue-finnered boobies, another icon, not endemic because they're found in other places in the world. But I think one of the things that we need to talk more about, and we will in a moment, I think, are the opportunities also to go snorkeling. So as we go through the islands, sailing at nighttime mostly, we'll arrive at our destinations. In the morning and the afternoon, we'll have opportunities not just for going walking on land, but also for going snorkeling. And this is a highlight which a lot of people don't really think about. You don't have to be an expert diver. This could be your first time in the water. It's good if you can swim. But again, a lot of the places we can go, you only need to go waist deep to be able to see some incredible underwater life, such as the marine iguanas. And don't be worried. These animal sharks are only dangerous in the movies. It's a great place to go snorkeling with rays, with turtles, with sharks, and much, much more. So the underwater life for me is just as exciting. And that's something which Darwin only hinted at because, of course, I don't think he jumped into those waters too often. Galapagos is somewhere that no matter what you've read, what you've heard, how many times you've listened to David Attenborough on the BBC, nothing actually really does prepare you for the reality. Again, as Giles mentioned, it's totally unique. But I think now we should talk a little more about exactly why it's unique and what we're going to see.
Jonathan, thank you. I think that goes to show why we regard you so highly, and you're one of our favourite guides. So thank you very much. You certainly gave me a flavour for it.
Pleasure.
So really, if you'll allow me just to kick off with the questions, I think for me the opening question needs to be: who is this trip for? Who's it aimed at? Who's going to get the most out of it? What sort of traveller are you if you want to go on this cruise? It's 10 days, right?
It's 10 days inclusive, with 8 days actually on the vessel itself, overnight. It is for everybody that has a keen interest in travel, exploring the natural world, wildlife, and is looking for perhaps a unique experience. I think today, in today's world, so much of our world, so many of the places we go to are similar to other places or something which you might have done or partially done before. Galapagos is completely unique.
Or being diluted to a sameness, aren't they? So this is
absolutely a sort of perhaps a mass product, and that is a question I often get: is, oh, but now there are hundreds of thousands of people visiting Galapagos. I think last year we probably reached about 200,000, which is one of the highest figures. But let's put that in perspective. About 7 million people go to the Eiffel Tower every year. Only 200,000 go to the Galapagos. The Eiffel Tower is about 5 square hectares or 10, 12 acres, perhaps. The Galapagos is spread over 139 square kilometers of ocean. So you don't see the crowds. You probably won't see many other vessels. You might be on land, perhaps with 1 or 2 other vessels. You probably won't see them, perhaps, except when you cross by briefly on a trail. So it is an experience where you can get away from this mad world that we live in, and have a totally unique experience. I think so. It's for everybody: photographers, keen naturalists, or if you just got a healthy curiosity about the world.
Roxy?
Yeah, I agree with Jonathan 100%. One thing that a lot of people don't realise is that whilst there's a number of islands in the Galapagos, only a few of them are actually inhabited. So one of the biggest questions I get asked is why go on a cruise? A lot of people have a fear of being on one vessel for that length of time, but that really gets you out to explore the islands. We have very carefully chosen the route. Jonathan alluded to that. We're going to be going around the western islands of Isabella, and then bringing you back through the central and then the southern islands of Floriana and Española. The point of why we have done that is very carefully to be able to show that that change in the landscape, because the islands have such diversity, and you can see how the progression of time from west to east, where the older islands show a very different diversity, and also some species are endemic to that specific island. So for travelers, why choose this one? It's been very carefully chosen. You'll have a Galapagos guide on board, but you also have Jonathan, who clearly has such a wide breadth of knowledge to add to this sort of trip.
Excellent. And just something that whilst I was making notes, we had such fantastic reviews from the trip last year, Jonathan. But one of them was from a very, very old friend of mine who you may remember, Vanessa, who was on the boat with you, who just had the time of her life. She said that actually the night skies and actually looking at the constellations, the star formations, all of those things was worth the trip itself, was worth it just for that. So I mean, I'm obviously missing something.
I agree. The moment you move away from the inhabited islands, and as Roxy just pointed out, only 4 islands are inhabited. The local population is somewhere between 25 and 30,000 people in total on all of the islands. So the moment you move away, and we will be only very briefly close to any of the inhabited areas, we get over to the western side of Isabella and Fernandina, there is 0 light pollution. I mean, nothing. There are no lights. There's no settlements. There's nothing out there. So you can look up and you can see the entire Milky Way. Depending on what time of the year, obviously, you might have meteor showers going through. So yes, that is one of the highlights, which perhaps people don't really talk about, because there's so much in Galapagos that you perhaps lose focus on on some of those things that you don't see anymore if you live in or even near a city these days.
Splendid. So that's the evenings taken care of. After what I understand, having looked at the reviews, the most fantastic food, dining experiences that are superb. I don't think we need to touch any more than that. But that's the evenings and the nights taken care of in amazingly spacious, sumptuous cabins. It's another point I think it's worth adding. But how are our days going to be spent? We've talked about a little bit about snorkeling and walking some trails. How are we going to spend our days on the island?
So typically, this is the cool season. So again, the two seasons: the tropical season, which is more from December through till about May, and then at the end of May it starts cooling down with, and that's the time when all of a sudden life explodes. It's when everything is breathing, especially the marine life. The rainy hot season is over. The cool season is coming in. So typically we have a wake up call 7 o'clock in the morning. Breakfast is between 7 and 8, and at 8 o'clock in the morning we'll head out on one of the islands. Now this might vary because for specific reasons we might wake folks up early at sunrise because we see marine life, dolphins around the vessel, or maybe at the odd sighting of a manta ray or some whales or something. So you might all of a sudden get an earlier wake up call that's unexpected. So it's not set in stone, but typically, let's say after breakfast, you'll do a landing. You'll head out on the small pangas, which are the little tenders. We head out in two small groups, usually of 8 in each one of the pangas, and we go for a walk, a stroll, of varying length. You don't have to go very far. Sometimes you could just land on a beach and you're surrounded by sea lions, marine iguanas, blue-footed boobies, and having done a walk, which duration might be up to a couple of hours, distance might be anywhere from 1 kilometer to 2, maybe maximum 3 if we do a more extended hike. Come back to the ship by 10:30, and at 11 o'clock we're kitted up after a brief refreshment and head out and go and do some snorkeling. So that's just the morning. After
Now,
a
can I
delicious
just ask
lunch,
a question,
brief...
just to give you a natural break? Because we've talked about snorkeling and your swimming ability. How fit do people need to be? I don't know who wants to answer this, because Roxy, you're giving the advice to people.
Yeah, I think when it comes to fitness, a concern is usually snorkeling. So those who can snorkel, excellent, and the guides are really great at helping support you, give you briefings. For those who really are unsure, you can just get into the water and hold on to the pangas. And that's one of the best ways, because then you really don't have to worry about the swimming. And then you can just see everything underneath, and it really is everywhere. And even if you decide you just don't want to, or you do it for half an hour and others are continuing, you can just sit back up on the panga, and there's always life around you. There's always things to see. You're not missing out.
And the walking, is that fairly benign, or do you need to be really big?
We have walks of different length and difficulty. I'd say no, you don't have to be anything more than I would say a keen walker. You don't have to have any uphill. We're not going up big distances. We're not climbing. Once in a while, there are some rocky patches, but you have choices. So you can decide, okay, do I want to do this, or would I prefer to remain perhaps in one area? So there are many choices amongst those opportunities. So it's not that you have to go out and do the whole hike or something. So I'd say, if you're a outdoors person, you enjoy the outdoors, you'll be fine. Most of it is on flat ground. Most of it is on fairly easy conditions, maybe sandy beaches and stuff.
Thank you. So I interrupted you. We're just as we were having our desserts. We move into the afternoons. So what are we doing then?
Well, maybe time for a brief nap. That's the emphasis on brief. So maybe a little afternoon nap. Then we'll maybe go out and do a second snorkel. So it depends. Some days we do 1, some days we do 2. And then back to the ship, and then later afternoon, as it's cooling down, we don't want to be out in the midday sun. We'll head out as the wildlife is also getting going again, and do another short, couple of hours of landing in the afternoon. Hopefully, watch a beautiful sunset. Return back to the ship, have a cold beer, quick shower, dinner, And if you have the energy, you stay up to watch a little bit of the night sky. If not, most people collapse in bed by about 8:30 at night.
Joseph,
And that's your average day.
Splendid. Can I just go back to the wildlife experiences? One of the things, there's a word that kept cropping up in the reviews that we had, and you know a lot of we cater for a lot of seasoned travelers who enjoy their wildlife experiences all over the world. But people who hadn't been to the Galapagos before were surprised by the intimacy of their wildlife experiences. And they said that was one of the things, especially with the guidance that they had with you and your colleagues on the boat, that really set this trip apart.
Yes, I think that's probably something which, as I mentioned before, nothing can really prepare you for. So when you see these documentaries, these wildlife documentaries, you think, well, the cameraman must have spent months, trying to get close to the wildlife to film these intimate moments. This is not the case of Galapagos. We often hear the word tame. The wildlife is tame. I would say that's definitely not the word. They have not been tamed. They simply have no fear of humans. We don't come into a sphere of what they understand as something which is threatening. So if you stand still or sit still, you'll have a sea lion walking up to you. We're supposed to keep a distance of a couple of meters, so generally you might back off. But if you're sitting still, they might come up, look at you, try and appraise what you are, and then continue on the way. It's the same with the boobies, the same with the iguanas. So most of the wildlife is rarely more than about 5 meters away from you. So again, for photographers, it's a bonanza. But for anyone who hasn't been in that kind of situation, it's sometimes a little overwhelming.
So I just want to come back to Roxy. You were very, very keen to talk about the route and how, when we were putting this trip together, what we wanted to do was put together the very best route for the cruise. But on top of that, and I think we've alluded to it slightly in what Jonathan was saying, we've been very careful about when we're going as well. Because I think we feel that this is if you're only going to go once, this is the best season to go. Would you not say?
Yeah, absolutely. And that's why Jonathan mentioned when you're just at that tipping point of changing over with the currents, you've got a real change in the wildlife. Photographers love this season because it's got, you see so much coming to life. It's the breeding season on Espanola. The flightless cormorants, I think, are doing their courtship ritual. So there's loads going on. To be honest, any season you go to the Galapagos, there's wonderful dynamics, but we do get to choose, and it's an excellent time to go to see the nesting and so much going on both on the land and in the water.
That's brilliant. So moving on, because obviously there are some logistical elements of this, is that we've selected the natural paradise again. You know, and I've alluded to the reviews about spacious rooms with cabins, magnificent food, but I think that the size of the boat has been carefully chosen as well, because was it 9-10 cabins?
Yeah, so it does come down to the Galapagos National Park ruling, but the smallest vessels tend to be around 16 passengers, and that's what we go with. It really gives you that intimate group. It means that you can have we have a guide that's from the Galapagos, which is always chosen, but we also have Jonathan, and that means that we have 2 specialists on board, and that gives you the best ratio you can actually have for traveling. The guide to traveller. So if you happen to be on 2 pangas, you never are without one of the experts, and that really will make the difference.
But it's a nice boat for nervous sailors, yes?
Ah, yes. It's a motor vessel, and whether you go for the entry-level cabin or you want a balcony, all of the rooms are spacious. You have ensuite cabins, and yeah, that's the reason why we work. We choose the same vessel each year because it really works for us, and everybody really appreciates the balance on board.
It gets me to another point, because one of the things I always wonder with, especially if people haven't done a group tour with us before. I mean, one of the interesting things about Steps Travelers, I think, is they're really interesting people who are interested. But if you were nervous about doing a group trip, is that something you should worry about? I mean, we've had one of the pieces of feedback we had from another traveler from last year's trip is that they were nervous and how surprised they were at how nice everybody was and how well everybody got on the boat. Has that been your experience, Jonathan? Roxy, you've been on this trip before. Does it usually attract the right sort of people? Is it a great vibe on board?
Be careful.
It has indeed. Yeah. No, that is an easy one to answer, because I think by the time most people have gone through the filtering processes of looking for a specific trip, looking for something which is slightly out of the ordinary, a unique experience, they tend to be, I wouldn't say birds of a feather, but certainly have a similar interest. And yes, I've been working in this industry for 37 years, I think, this year. Wow, time goes by. And I think I could maybe say on 3 occasions, we had instances where there was perhaps not a comfortable and uncomfortable situation on board. So I don't know, 800, 900, 1,000 trips to Galapagos. That's 0.3%.
And
So
I guess if you want to see it, this is the way, right? This is the best way.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
I wanted to just ask you as well, both of you, please chip in on this. There's a couple of days to be spent in Quito as well, in Ecuador on arrival. Now, that looks to me to be a fascinating city. I know that some people are worried about urban environments and stuff, but Quito, is that a must-see part of the trip, do you think?
Absolutely. In fact, I was there, 3 days ago, and about a week ago, I was in the old historic center. I hadn't been there for a couple of years, visiting my children who are living and working out there. There's a lot of concern right now about safety in Ecuador as a whole and in Quito. It is very, very safe. It is safer than most big cities around the world, and that goes for cities that we all love and know. So I would say that that's not really a concern. Common sense, as with everywhere. It is one of the most beautiful cities in Latin America. It is a World Heritage Site, Quito. The historic center is beyond beautiful, well worth a visit. And I went out there with my eldest daughter, and we just went on an impromptu walk around of the old city. Absolutely fantastic. Well worth it. And I'm a person who lived in Ecuador for 30 years. I've been there many times.
What anything to add to that, Roxy?
No, I just completely agree. We have travelers go through Quito all year. Through Ecuador is one of the safest countries I've ever traveled through, and I wouldn't ever have a hesitation. Touching on Quito itself, though, I think we include it because it really gives you that introduction to being in South America. It is a UNESCO World Heritage Site, and it's just beautiful. It gives you a lovely location to relax for the first day, get over the longish flight, and then you head off to the Galapagos. It works beautifully, and it's definitely worth visiting.
Splendid. I have 2 more questions, and I'm going to ask each of you to answer individually. That if you were to appraise this trip in your individual ways, what would be your 3 key highlights that people are going to experience? Roxy.
Me. Okay. Well, the Galapagos is outstanding. It is ranked pretty much the home for wildlife in the world, the unique place to visit, and it's undoubtedly that. You can't go there without just being amazed. And you always love, you start the trip and you come off the plane and you see everybody photographing the first sea lions. You see down at the water and everybody is taking the photos, and you can't help but be that person. And then when you leave, you're like, they've no idea. They've just arrived, because the rest of the trip I've had them coming up and hitting me in the face. I've had them pushing me on the beach. I'm not going to say that any of that is right. They shouldn't have been doing that, but it's their spatial awareness, not mine. It's a truly, truly special place. From children to adults, it's gorgeous. Don't get bashful now, Jonathan, but Jonathan's my absolute favorite leader. And I say to everybody, he's by far my favorite guide, because I think he encapsulates everything that you want. He's extremely friendly. He is an expert. He's lived in South America for most of his life, and just is really great at welcoming everybody and ensuring everybody ticks the boxes thereafter.
So from a hosting point of view, that's 2 highlights. So that's the amazing wildlife experiences and the fact that Jonathan's taking you. So your third, briefly, your third big takeaway is going to be?
I'm going to say that being in Steps Travel Presents, because you get to be with like-minded travelers. I think it is important. People get to travel with, we are very lucky. We have lovely people travel with us, and it just makes for a very enjoyable experience.
Brilliant. So Jonathan, your 3 highlights from this trip. This is what's it going to be?
That's difficult to follow. Okay, thank you for that. First and foremost, you're in for the experience of a lifetime. There's absolutely no doubt about that. There is nothing that compares to Galapagos. So if you haven't been, you've got to go. It's a small trip, small boat environment, but I would say we're not hyping this itinerary. I challenge anyone to go online and find an itinerary which covers more areas, a better area, or a more diverse area. It doesn't exist, okay? With the time that we have, we're going to the very, very top best of the best. So this itinerary, this is the reason, and you know, obviously there are many reasons for choosing this trip, but this would be my top reason. It's going to all of those places that you really want to go, especially if it's a once in a lifetime. However, that comes with a warning. Galapagos for many people is once in a lifetime, and people come back time and time again. So once it's in your heart, it's there forever. But yeah, sorry. Back to the original question. Small boat environment, trip of a lifetime, and Galapagos.
And Quito.
Don't need to say
you gave me 4.
And Quito. And Quito, that combination. Yeah.
So I have one question, or really before we finish. And it's something that always fascinates me. I whenever you're on a trip anywhere in the world, I think the hope is that when you come back, you're going to be slightly different. You're going to be a different person, I think.
That is absolutely true, and it's something that we do occasionally mention in the introduction. And people, oh yes, you know, it's the usual that you're just saying to people to try and get them excited. It is not something we're just saying. This trip will change you in ways that you perhaps don't understand when you first go.
So that was my question, was going to be, on the basis that I hope that this is a life-changing trip, when you return from this trip, who are you going to be? How will it have changed?
Someone who is more aware of the beauty of this planet, more aware of the fragility of this planet, more aware of what we must do, what our duties, our obligations of stewards of this planet are, and what they must do next.
Roxy, I dare you to top that.
Well, that covers pretty much what I was going to say. We're very close partners with the Galapagos Conservation Trust, and it's a really big and very big focal point for what we do. And I think if you can walk away and appreciate the work and appreciate the efforts that we need to make, then I think that will be most people's takeaway.
Brilliant. Thank you very much. I do enjoy putting these 2 together. I'd like to just say thank you, Jonathan. I think you've lived up to your reputation as the guard who charms and wows in equal measure. I'd like to thank Charles Jewett, who in the background has been just moderating this session to make sure that everything goes to plan. Yeah. Roxy, you remain my favourite. Full details of this trip are available on the Steps website under our grouped expert-led cruises section. And if we email this to you, it'll be embedded in the email. Thank you very much. If you've watched to the end, we hope to see you in the Galapagos for what promises to be the trip of a lifetime. Thank you very much, everyone. Thank you.